So I'm sorry for all that pause. We have a lack of a quorum unexpectedly. So we are going to proceed with your presentation anyways for the members who are here. And that's what we're going to do, is just informational items and no decisions. So, but thank you guys for being here. It's so good to see you all.
Lovely to see you, Rachel.
Yes.
I know, it's been a while. So,
Yeah.
all right, so we have, and I'm just gonna make sure this is said because it probably is not on our earlier Zoom recording since the audio wasn't working. But we have Brian Engstrom, who's our new student commissioner, and Charles Watson in attendance tonight. Two staff members, Clay Downing of planning and Rachel Thomas, city recorder, are also in attendance. So, and we'll proceed with our first agenda item, which is a presentation from Sherry and Joy from Oregon Heritage. I'll pull up your PowerPoint here just a second. Okay, you should be able to see, and feel free to start whenever you're ready.
All right. Can you hear me okay, Rachel?
We can, yes.
All right, wonderful. I'm Sherry Stewart. I coordinate the statewide Oregon Main Street Network. We have over 100 communities that are part of our network to date. So, Rachel, it looks like you're advancing the slides for me. All
Yes.
right, you can go to the next one. So Main Street is a place-based economic development strategy. We like to say it's preservation. It's looking at all of those assets a community has and leveraging those. And that's everything from the built environment, the architectural history, the history and heritage, all of the mix of businesses, all of the things that make a community a community. We really leverage those assets and opportunities as part of a long-term sustainable economic development strategy. Next slide, please. When we work with communities, we use a process that was developed by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. The National Main Street Center was created in 1977 and has been working in thousands of communities across the country. And it's really looking at a comprehensive way of looking at all of the things that make a community vibrant and vital, especially in the historic downtown. And so that's the process that they develop is the process that we use when we work with communities. So the next slide, Rachel. How this works is, as it relates to downtown revitalization, Main Street is a registered trademark brand of the National Main Street Center, or Main Street America, as they're rebranded. We hold a licensing agreement with Main Street America to be able to designate communities and allow them to use the registered trademark process that they develop. So we're that connector. We're the only statewide program in Oregon. We have a network of about 45 other states that are implementing a statewide Main Street structure. And so only through our umbrella can communities identify as Main Street and use this process. Next slide, please. In Oregon, each state, well, we have to use the structure that was developed broadly by Main Street America. Each state can develop their own way of serving communities, and each state program is housed a little bit differently. In Oregon, we're housed in Oregon Heritage, which is part of Oregon Parks and Rec, so we're part of state government. Some states have a statewide Main Street program that's an independent nonprofit organization, where they might be part of economic development or some other kind of structure. But here in Oregon, when we were restarted by the state legislature in 2007, we were first started under Business Oregon, but then moved by 2009 over to Parks and Rec. So that's where we live. And in terms of the structure, Joy lives on kind of the historic preservation side. I live as part of the outreach bureau. That's where things like the Oregon Heritage Commission is, a certified local government, historic cemetery programs, those kinds of things. That's where Oregon Main Street lives. So we're right there as part of that bureau. Next slide, Rachel. In Oregon, when we were restarted by the legislature, we wanted to work with the broadest range of communities as possible, wherever they were at in their efforts to enhance and sustain their historic downtowns or traditional commercial neighborhood districts. And so we came up with a tiered structure. We've since tweaked that structure a little bit, but in essence, it has remained the same. We have a connected communities level. Those are for communities that don't want to actively use the Main Street structure for their revitalization effort. Maybe they don't have the capacity or the resources in place yet to launch a full-blown Main Street effort, but they care about their historic downtowns and they want to do some projects to help improve their communities, and they want to be connected to us. That's our connected communities. And then we have our Main Street track, and we have 3 levels of participation for communities that are part of our Main Street track, indicating how engaged they are and their readiness to really implement a full Main Street. We have the affiliated Main Streets. Those are organizations that are getting their structure in place, attracting the people and financial resources they need to sustain a long-term effort. And we do a lot of startup services for those communities. Then we have our fully designated Main Street level. Those are communities that have a well-funded organization. They have paid staff in place. They are doing projects and activities in all of the areas that are part of the Main Street 4-point approach, and really seeing some transformative changes in their community. Then we created a pathway forward for communities that meet national Main Street accreditation criteria every year. Those standards that they feel are indicators of a highly functioning organization. So we have the accredited Main Street. We also, a couple of years ago, created a rural regional Main Street structure for communities that are really small and may not have the capacity to hire staff support. And so an organization steps forward and agrees to be the hub for that region, and then takes in communities under their hub and is their connector for them. And we have 2 regional hubs right now, with a 3rd in the pipeline. The Oregon Frontier Chamber of Commerce has 10 communities under theirs. Their total population for their Tri-County is 5,000. So we're talking really tiny towns. And then up the Wallowa Valley, we have 3 communities that are under the Northeast Oregon Economic Development District. Next slide, please. Now, communities that participate in our network do receive a lot of benefits. We're part of state government, so there's no fee to participate in our Oregon Main Street network. And based upon what level a community participates, they're eligible for a bundle of services from us as part of the benefit of being part of the network. The connected communities, those communities join on a year-round basis, but they don't receive any on-site technical assistance to us. It's mainly networking benefits and participation in trainings and workshops. But our Main Street track, that's when we really engage with local communities as they request our services. One of the benefits that our network values really highly is just that ability to network. We have weekly Mornings on Main call. We bring in guest speakers, but it's also just an opportunity for people who are rolling up in their sleeves, care about their downtown, and are working hard on a shared mission to really get together, share best practices, things that are really working in their community, or if they have an issue, they have an opportunity of using the brain power of the network. And so people, that's really a beloved thing that started during the pandemic, but we've continued them on because our network really, really values them. So we do those Morning on Main. We also do a lot of other networking. We do quarterly workshops for our Main Street track communities, and we move those around the state so that people have an opportunity to be on site in some of our Main Street network communities, and a host of other things. We provide direct technical assistance to help communities develop a mission statement, a vision statement for their district, some other types of assistance for program evaluation or community assessment, a lot of things, a lot of resources, a lot of technical expertise that assist a community wherever they're at when they have the capacity to benefit from the types of services. We do a lot of trainings and workshops and a biannual conference. We also have funding available from time to time. In 2015, the legislature created the Oregon Main Street Revitalization Grant, which is for building improvement projects that help spur economic development. And it's for communities that participate in our Main Street network. So that's now a huge benefit. Beginning in 2017, we were able to give out our first round of grants of up to $100,000 per project. The next biennium, the legislature doubled that amount from $2.5 million to a pool of $5 million. So we were able to increase the amount of grants up to $200,000 per project. In this biennium, we will be opening up an Oregon Main Street Revitalization Grant application in January 2025. We received $10 million from the legislature, so the maximum project award per building is now $400,000. So a significant tool to help bring back historic buildings, put upper floors back to life, put in elevators. There's a wide variety of uses being made creatively of those Oregon Main Street Revitalization Grant dollars. It can be used for building improvement projects for existing buildings. It can be used for new infill construction compatible with the historic district. And it can also be used for acquisition. But it has to meet those twin purposes. It has to be a building improvement project, and it has to help enhance the economic base. So kind of those twin goals of Main Street of historic preservation and economic development. This grant program kind of straddles that boundary right there. We also periodically have some other funding sources for our designated and accredited level communities. We gave a small operations grant this year and a strategic planning grant last year, non-competitive grant. And so those funding resources we periodically have available. We also put together a lot of training materials, online recorded webinars, handbooks, workbooks, those kinds of things, and those all live on our website. So those are some of the types of benefits that communities that participate in our network receive as a result of being a network member. Next slide, please. In 2022, we contracted with an outside consultant to do an independent analysis of the Oregon Main Street network over a 10-year period, covering 2010 through 2020. So some of 2011 through 2021. So covering a little bit of the pandemic area. And through that study, what we discovered is that we are having a big impact on the local economy. We're having positive fiscal impacts on local government as well as our statewide government. And we're helping to foster social connections, both at the local level and across the state. Next slide, please. How Main Street has an impact in their community. So as a result of local Main Street programs being in place at those higher tiers, we're definitely having an impact in terms of historic preservation. So helping save buildings, putting them back into productive use, bringing back that historic character, all of those kinds of things as a result of a Main Street program being there and being one of those lenses on a historic downtown, advocating for work happening in the community, opening people eyes up to the possibilities of historic buildings. We're having that. We're also having an impact, an economic development impact, supporting local businesses. Our Main Street programs are good connectors with resources and technical assistance and training businesses need. Placemaking activities, as you see behind me, one of our lovely Main Streets, those banners and flower baskets and interpretation of historic buildings, all those kind of fun things. That's a result, and a lot of times is a Main Street program developing in a community. Tourism and customer attraction, strong impact, one of the biggest areas of impact. And then just forging those partnerships, knowing that Main Street programs don't do it alone, but looking at who's doing what in the community and leveraging those resources. Next slide, please. These next few slides, I'm not going to really cover in depth. I just wanted to pull out some of the stats that the study found as a result of the local Main Streets being there, generated an additional 266 million in sales revenue and 2,400 jobs, supporting Main Street businesses. Next slide. We also are helping collectively across the state as a result of the efforts of Main Street, a positive return on tax revenue as a result of the local Main Street programs being in place and the statewide program. The state invested 1.8 over that time period in Oregon Main Street, but it generated 3.5 million in additional sales. So, exceeded the amount of money invested in the Oregon Main Street program itself. Next slide. We also, as I mentioned, have been strengthening those community connections, which is so important to build the social capacity and the health and well-being of a community. We do that through integrating community's history and heritage, through events and activities, creating those spaces that are just inviting for people to get out of their cars, walk around in our downtowns and experience. So creating those inviting places for people to gather and socialize. So, and next slide, please. And all of those areas that I just mentioned, this kind of encapsulates the power of the Main Street network. So as I mentioned, tourism and customer attraction, really strong there, 134 million as a result of the local Main Street program being there, but historic preservation, leveraging 48 million extra as a result of a Main Street organization being in place. Next slide, please. How Main Street works and how it connects to the work that you do on the ground locally. Main Street is a comprehensive approach that looks at all of those things that make for a healthy and vibrant downtown, from physical improvements through the design element, through strengthening the economic base, through economic vitality, bringing people together through events and activities under the promotion arm, and then fundamentally just having an organizational structure in place to attract the people and partners that you need. But I see with, historic preservation commissions, certified local governments, those are all avenues of partnership. When through the design, we're celebrating the history and historic character of a district. Through promotion, we might be doing events and activities that celebrate a community's history. We're helping to forge partnerships. So that's one of the key partners at a local level. I know when I started my Main Street career 34 years ago as an executive director, I had a strong partnership with our historic Preservation Commission and working on the building improvement projects and some other fun things that we did. Fundamentally, though, Main Street work is really grassroots and community driven. So while we have the structure that we implement based upon national Main Street, it's really a community at the local level that identifies their assets and opportunities and then picks their projects that they want to work on. The cool thing about Main Street is it's adaptable no matter what size community. We work with towns that are like less than 100 up to an urban neighborhood district in Portland, which is crazy when you think about it. But this structure works for all of those level of community. And I think that's really cool about it. Next slide, please. I wanted to just show you, pull out one of those areas of Main Street where I felt like it had strong relationship with the works that historic preservation commissions or certified local governments take on, or opportunities for partnerships. So these are all of the types of projects the design committee under the Main Street umbrella might choose to undertake. Everything from doing building inventories and looking at that structure and what the needs and issues are, to facade improvements, wholesale building improvements, historic walking tours, building maintenance guides, like what's the care and feeding of a historic building. Somebody may be a new historic building owner and not know, hey, go out and clean those gutters or do this or do that. How do you restore those windows? All of those cool things that a Main Street program can help coordinate some education and training and facilitate some connections there. So there's all sorts of really cool things that a design committee could undertake. And this is just a very, some of them from some of our towns, like, mural projects that celebrate some of the history, to, stating this is a before and after, really cool project, to the wayfinding signage that they have in Pendleton, where they interpret the community's history. Just some really cool things out there that communities are doing. Next slide, please. And then I wanted to show you at a very micro level. This is from the Dallas Downtown Association, did a board goal study session a few years ago. But this just highlights how closely the work that Main Street aligns with certified local governments and historic preservation work in a community. So the design goal is a revitalized downtown reflective of the historic character and small town community feel. And then I pulled out, like, one of their objectives is working on creating Dallas pride in the community. And what that meant to them is doing a historic walking tour, sharing their story programs, some heritage reenactments on the square. So a lot of things about that history and heritage and culture, really celebrating that and creating pride in the community about that history and heritage. They have vacant spaces in their downtown, so they wanted to do some historic photo displays, Dallas Through the Ages kind of storefront thing, to activate some of those empty spaces. And then encouraging facade improvements was another goal of those. And so some of their tactics was to provide design assistance or helping property owners apply for appropriate grants. So that's how, on a real granular basis, Main Streets connect directly with the work of certified local governments, potentially historic preservation commissions. And I think I have one slide that I think is a thank you slide, and then I'll pass it on to Joy. So thank you.
Thank you, Sherry.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Let me find my screen here. Okay. All right, I am Joy Sears. I am the restoration specialist, and I handle all kinds of things. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. I'm the restoration specialist. I do lots of things. I wear lots of hats. My main job is taking care of our tax incentives for historic properties, helping with our grants, our Main Street grants, which Sherry just talked about, our Preserving Oregon grants, and our Diamonds in the Rough grants, and our Certified Local Government grants when there's pass-through monies for historic properties. And then even beyond that, I do handle our coordination of our preservation agreements and covenants as those come through for various projects. But my main goal, other than that, is to do education for all types of folks, for the public. And so basically, I'm taking care, as Sherry said, the care and feeding of your old building. So I have an old building. How do I take care of it? Everybody comes with, a varied experience, from none to, decades of experience. Normally I'm getting to deal with people who are coming into communities, but sometimes I'm dealing with people that have lived in communities and just haven't nearly taken control or been in charge of property maintenance for a historic building. So where do I start? These are the first three things that I'm looking at. Before we're at the facade, which everybody goes, yeah, that's the sexy stuff. That's the stuff all people are gonna see. Do you have a good roof, or do you have many kids swimming pools around and garbage containers catching water coming through the roof? We've been in quite a few buildings like that. Do you have structure issues? Still dealing with people that have damage from the spring break quake back in the 90s. A lot of it not dire, but still structural issues that they're still dealing with. And do you have a good foundation? If you got any of those three issues, that's where your money should go first, before we start talking about the pretty stuff or the facades. So I find going to historic properties, I encourage folks to go outside and at least walk across the street or get back from your building and look at the building. I also find bringing someone else for fresh eyes to look at your building, because I think a lot of us get eye blind to things. We just see the same thing over and over, and sometimes it gets a little it just maybe doesn't become important. So I encountered lots of buildings that people go, oh, it's really bad and everything. Well, it's springtime. Does you need a bath? A good garden hose. Oh, that should be garden hose, bath, not garden house. And a nice gentle scrubbing if you've got some things, either a plastic or a natural bristle brush. Nothing harsh. We want to do no harm. Do you have windows that need cleaning? These are always good places to start. They can look fresh and good for a start. Do you have issues with birds or vermin? Deal with lots of buildings like that. What can be done to discourage roosting and nesting, or just getting access to your building? I go in through lots of buildings that have either holes or windows open or different things, and have lots of pigeon issues and lots of issues. Things we've got to try and take care of if you want to deal with our buildings. And as just about every community deals with this, people loitering after your business is closed, sometimes hanging out or sleeping in storefront entries or back areas, the different things we've got to think about when we're dealing with historic properties or businesses in general. So these are three of my big things. First, do no harm. Think about what you're doing before you do it to a property. I find the worst thing anybody can do is I know how to use a pressure washer, and then they go ahead and try and clean a building. I saw a building, and I can't remember, somewhere in Eastern Oregon, where the superintendent said he owned a pressure washer and he knew how to clean the building. Well, he knew how to use it, all right. He etched a lot of the brick masonry on it and did a lot of, unfortunately, irreparable damage. So, be cautious when you're doing things. Always start with gentlest means possible and work yourself up. And abrasive cleaning is almost a given to be no, and don't do that. Other than that, repair, especially when it comes to windows and doors and different things. Wood in Oregon, typically, if it's old growth, it'll last a lot longer, decades possibly. But generally 30 years is probably the max for most wood elements that need to be maintained or repaired before then on a regular schedule. And then lastly, am I being a good steward of the history of my town? Thinking about more than just us. We're owners in the sense, but owners in the small sense of all these buildings come to us with history. They all been there way longer than lots of us, and we want them to go forward and be around for future generations to enjoy. So maintenance is critical to the longevity of your building and your historic assets. Sherry was talking about cleaning out gutters, making sure downspouts are connected, our windows open, our windows shut, just going around and looking. Is there water puddling up in places where it shouldn't be? I've had some well-meaning people go ahead and look at the way historic buildings are operated and undo the good things. Old buildings are meant to breathe. I dealt with a property in downtown Independence where over the years, the historic storefront had a number of vents that were venting into the basement crawl space. I don't believe it was a true basement. I think it was just a crawl space. But over the years, the vents had gotten plugged up. The water had nowhere to go, and it rotted out the floor, the whole first floor of the business and the building, which had to be dealt with before it could even be rehabilitated for new use. So, sometimes it's thinking about what we're doing and making sure it doesn't do any harm. This is one of the oldest wood commercial buildings in Marion County. This is the Hobson Gelwin building in downtown Staten. It is a historic false building. This is how it got listed on the left-hand side. Got some new property owners that wanted to rehabilitate the structure. Well, great. We all wanted to help with the front, but it had a lot of issues to even get to that point. So it needed internal temporary stabilization, check. New foundation, check. New roof, check. And then lastly, not lastly necessarily for the project, but lastly, at least for the exterior, was to recreate the historic storefront and false front on the building to restore it to its historic appearance. And it's great, but it was thankfully a recipient of multiple grants through our office to help with that work, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, I think, from the owners. So lots of things to be done. This is an extreme case. Not every single building needs this. A lot of them need fewer things, but you have to have a list of priorities of what you want to get done. One of the biggest things I encourage certified local governments and Main Street organizations is work with your local historical society and find the historic photos showing your downtown buildings. They're excellent guides to help with restoration, preservation, or recreation of some elements. This is the Bowlby building in downtown Enterprise. This is how it looked not long after it was built. It's made of constructed of local Bowlby stone. Looking very nice. I believe it was early on. This photo is early on from its construction. Well, Fast forward to not so many years ago. The building got rehabilitated. It had been when it had been surveyed and inventoried in the past, it was a Western Auto. They had closed up most of the windows on the front, closed in all the transoms, stuccoed over the front, done a lot of things, but haven't really done a lot, I don't believe, on the second floor. The new owners took on a very large project. This is now Fish Trap down on the first floor, and I believe apartments on the second. Big things, details, details, details. I get to nitpicky on details because a lot of times it's historic material that I'm looking at, and especially windows are one of my things. The rehabilitated storefront looks good, not exactly what I would do. The second floor windows, not exactly a replica of what was there, because there was the historic windows there. Oops. So going back, you can see on the second floor the large double hung windows, and I'm not sure if that's a transom over the top or if it's just a panel, but it looks very different from the handcrafted items here in the historic photo and the modern recreation with modern materials. I just didn't get all the details right, but it got rehabilitated. It's a great building. It's being used by the community, and we actually held meetings there last fall there in Enterprise. So great that it got rehabbed. Remodeled buildings, the ugly buildings. We're starting to get to as some of my consultant friends say, all the good buildings have been done. Now we got to start looking at the next tier down. I call them, most of them are muddled buildings. This is the YMCA building in downtown Astoria. And this is how it looked in the 1980s when it got surveyed and inventoried. It's a black and white photo, but it looks blue and white, just like a lot of the photo, the still showing on the more current photo. A academy had taken it over. They had switched out a lot of the windows and made the smushed windows down. Not sure why. They had vision that no one was really seeing. When the new owners, I'm not sure how many years ago, came around, they found the historic photos and the historic drawings for the YMCA and took it upon themselves to reopen those window openings, reopen those storefront areas, and rehabilitate it back into commercial space. It's no longer the Y. It hasn't been the Y for a long time. They even recreated the historic balcony railing around over the front entry. And this is just from their 3-year progress report from the special assessment program, property tax program that they're taking advantage of to help with the rehabilitation of their building. And they also got some grants through that, and I believe some help through Astoria through the city for their project. So, it doesn't need to stay remodeled. It can be different. It was definitely non-contributing in the 80s. It's definitely been, it's going forward in the good spot to be reevaluated as contributing and getting back a lot of its historic appearance. So wants versus needs. Deal with lots of this with folks. It's great if we could do all our needs versus our wants, but usually people do not have unlimited access to money. But I do encourage folks to take advantage of all the different types of programs that they can. As much as possible. Most of our programs do not prohibit folks from taking advantage of other things through locals folks, through city governments. Sometimes there are restrictions with local governments to taking advantage of other programs. Just making sure that you are doing everything you can. But I tell people, are there things about your building you don't like? You know, there might be changes. We take buildings as they come. There might be changes in the 70s, 80s, maybe the 90s. Maybe it's something serviceable. Maybe it's something that just needs a good cleaning prep. Maybe a coat of paint could do wonders for something that isn't so deteriorated that it has to be taken down. Or is it something that's been so, you know, so detracted from the historic character of the building, it needs to come down? Sometimes I refer to our Diamonds in the Rough grant as a crowbar grant. Sometimes we have to use our hands or some tools to peel back some of those added layers of other people's tastes or maintenance type decisions over the years. Definitely things that we can look at. It's a dollar per dollar matching grant up to $20,000. Sometimes we can do a lot by just peeling back the layers and fixing up the historic buildings. We've done that with lots of them. Sometimes you have 2 or 3 layers you've got to get to get back to the bulb of the building and the jewels that have been covered up. Also deal with lots of properties that have an early 20th century, but historic storefronts rarely stay in taste, or if money and they get replaced. Do you have a mid-century storefront? It's not the end of the world. It's actually part of the history of the building. You don't absolutely need to rip it out. Usually we recommend it's best to leave it until it's either so deteriorated it needs to be replaced, or their grant money's available, excuse me, that you can pursue a more compatible or historic based storefront. There aren't always historic photos of buildings to use as guidelines, but it's definitely somewhere to start. If you don't, we kind of go with kind of generic in the time frame traditional aspects of that. So I don't know if anybody there knows this building. So in 2012, I do believe. So I've been at the Oregon Shippo since 2005. And we always get contacted by people that wanted to do things to their property, but most of them were either non-contributing or they needed help to get to that next level of being to evaluate their property, to be contributing in a historic district or be nominated all by themselves. So downtown on your Main Street area, this was a building that was covered up. It was kind of the sore thumb on the block of very nice buildings. It was kind of a black tooth there. And property owners wanted to do something with it. And I said, great. I said, well, we've got this what I call agricultural sheet metal on the front. Can we take off a piece and look and see what's underneath? Well, they wanted to put it, the property owner wanted to make that into the contractor's estimate. And I was like, well, no, that's really not a good idea. Let's get a better idea. We can always put the piece of sheet metal back up, but let's see what we're doing. So I got to encourage them to take a piece off. And you can see that on the right side. Took off a piece on the very end, and we've got historic concrete block that was formed. It looked like modern masonry, but for a cheaper price. These are basically concrete blocks, kind of like on the realm of what we do now, but they had a random kind of stone ashlar texture to them. Unfortunately, someone apparently got a 50-gallon drum of Forest Service green paint and had painted the whole historic masonry over the years. Not the end of the world. We can always deal with that. And they were the proud recipient of one of our first Diamonds in the Rough grants. And so we got to this building now. So this has historically been a butcher meat market here in downtown Newberg. And thankfully, the green Forest Service green paint came off easily with a mild pressure wash, and no chemicals were needed or anything more abrasive than just hot water sprayed on the building. It all came off. Did have to rebuild the transoms over the storefronts. And unfortunately, one of the things we have to deal with when we deal with uncovering historic storefronts is a lot of times interiors have had drop ceilings put in, and that may or may not be part of the project at that time. But it's not the end of the world. We can deal with that. In this case, for this building, the drop ceilings were still in place. So we went with an opaque glass for the transoms, reframed them, painted up the nice trim, put back in the transoms, did not do the storefronts, left those as mid-century storefronts. Maybe in the future, that's something that can be handled. Had a great bunch of historic photos showing this building. Is it pristine? No. That agricultural sheet metal that had been screwed on whatever to the building did do some damage. Most of it was repairable. It's not pristine. It shows its age. It's got a few character marks on it, just showing its age, but it returned this building to, stop being missing tooth or black tooth and the wide realm of the Main Street smile, basically. So it was a really great project and one of many that we've done. And that's it for me, but I'm always available for questions. And if anybody wants me to come, definitely let me know. I travel around the entire state, as does Sherry normally, but I do more of the technical advising. And we're both in Salem, so.
Questions for them?
I have a couple questions actually for one for Joy and one for or a couple for Sherry.
All right, can you guys hear Charles pretty well, or?
Can you hear me now?
Yep, who do you want to start with?
I'll start with Joy since that's where we're at.
Okay.
I think I've already answered my question though, however, but I still would like to ask it, and that is for windows, because I think I heard you say that you were partial to windows too, and I kind of am too. But I was wondering if when you go through and you're going to rebuild a building or at least make it prettier, is it preferable to rebuild those old windows? And are there companies out there that do that kind of thing, or can you go ahead and just replace the windows? Like nowadays we like the more energy efficient, double, triple paned kind of things that don't look all that great.
If you've got historic wood windows, especially, I know folks, I can recommend folks, I can make suggestions of folks to contact. There's plenty of them in the Portland through Willamette Valley that do that kind of work. We want to keep as much historic integrity and keep that money local as much as possible. Not to say that the windows don't need some love, but we can get them between rehab, weather stripping, and possibly storm windows of some manner to be equal to a new window that is not going to result in the historic window getting tossed in landfill and a new window coming from God knows where into our world, and not lasting as long as the historic wood windows last. So yes, definitely look me up if you want more to talk about that.
Okay, great. And then I have a couple of questions for Sherry, if you don't mind. Hey, Sherry, one of them is as far as the grants go for projects, I'm wondering if there is a limit to the amount of grants that a city could ask for. Say, for example, we have like 3 buildings here we want to redo here. I'm assuming we need a grant for each building, but is there a limit to how many grants we could apply for?
Sure. Good question. Oops, sorry. Good question. So we do not limit the number of grants that the Main Street organization can apply for on behalf of the business or property owner that's going to make the improvement on. And I should make clear that the grant goes to the Main Street organization. They manage it, not the project, but they do pass through. So they have to do the reporting and, track the invoices and connect with Joy and make sure the project's going as outlined in the grant. So we don't limit the number that the organization can apply for. However, those are very large grants to manage. So the Main Street organization has to have the capacity to both apply for them and then manage them. And to be honest, it's very rare if we award any in one Main Street cycle, more than one to one community, although in the last round, Albany, I think, got two. I think another community got two. But we try and spread it out geographically around the state. So it'd have to be pretty compelling grant. They do have to have, the Main Street organization, some clear goals and objectives. Your community needs to have clear goals and objectives of how the projects that you're putting forward for consideration meet those goals and objectives. That weighs into the scoring a lot more highly. So yeah, so we don't limit it, but just if there's one project that you think really meets all of your criteria, local criteria, then we encourage you to invest in doing a really great application for that, instead of letting the committee be the one that picks the project. And maybe it's not your priority project that gets picked by the committee for whatever reason. So that's the long and short of it. So.
Okay, very great. And then my other question is, as far as marketing goes, is there a cost to the city or to us for that marketing, and what exactly does that entail? Do we get like banners, or is there websites that will support the city here, or not support the city, but support the downtown efforts and that sort of thing?
Sure. Yeah. So the marketing value to communities that participate in our network, we tout them all the time. We do press releases, blogs, stories, those kinds of things about communities. We list them on our website. We promote the value of local Main Streets. We push forward stories to Main Street America about what our communities are doing. So it's that type of marketing assistance that we provide directly to communities. But then there's the marketing value that the Main Street organization sees themselves as a benefit, and so they can tout that they're Main Street community. So other people that are familiar with Main Street and the value of that, they recognize, oh, like I have people from out of state all the time talk to me and say, where's your Main Street communities? We want to know where we should be going, and so our Main Street communities can themselves market themselves as a Main Street. And that's a brand recognition that people that love and care about historic downtowns, there's a certain segment of the market that understands that marketing value. Also with our partners across the state, like Travel Oregon or some of those others, really recognize the value of having a destination downtown, and they're leaning into that more. So promoting the value of being a Main Street community, and knowing that those communities that have sustained their effort over the long time really have a lot going on in their downtown. That's an opportunity to market from a statewide level. So that's the kind of marketing that we're talking about.
Okay, great. And then one last question, and this could be for probably either or, probably more so to Joy, I'm guessing. And so once you have identified a project and you're starting to work on it, does that your organization, do you guys help with, like, say, project management of that and resource management, that sort of thing, or is that something that the contractor does themselves, and then you guys can do some input on it? I don't know. I don't know if I'm saying that how, or if you understand what I'm trying to say.
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah. So I can definitely come out. I can make suggestions for contact folks, or if you need resources. I talk about all of our programs to see how we can help. Sometimes I put folks in touch with other folks that are doing similar type projects for some type of mentoring, if possible. But as much as possible, I'll tell people that I don't know everything. And so if I don't know, I'll try and put you in touch with somebody who does, even if they don't necessarily live here. But we can provide some kind of framework of things and make suggestions, but it's ultimately up to the the team that's been put together for a project to decide what's best for them. But so does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's it for me.
And Chuck and Brian, if you guys don't know, we do have a Main Street organization in Newberg, and it's the Newberg Downtown Coalition. Yeah. Well, this mic isn't working for that anyway, so, but it does help in the room, we can hear a little better. So, yeah, I know our mics are, and I was like, mic who? Yeah, so we do have Downtown Coalition, or the Downtown Coalition is our Main Street organization. And they have worked on a couple of projects in our town before, like you saw, the Second Street Church renovation, and they worked on a historic theaters grant for the Cameo a while back, and there's been a few other ones. And there are also, one of the programs they mentioned briefly was mentors, and they have a really great mentor for organization, where if we were going to apply for a grant and didn't feel quite ready to go there, we can look at getting a mentor to help us kind of build up and make sure our organization is ready to go. So there's a lot of great opportunities that Oregon Heritage and Main Street program have out there to help people with projects and help them actually do this work. But as the Downtown Coalition is our Main Street organization, we would be partnering with them and they would be doing the application.
Okay.
So we're not the city's Main Street organization, but we want to work with them since this is one of our direct goals that we've discussed. So that's one of the reasons we asked these two to come tonight, so we understand the program a little bit better, so that we're able to bring it forward. And I used to work for it too. It's kind of fun seeing my old coworkers.
And I have another silly question.
Mhm.
Are we already members with
So
these organizations?
the Newberg Downtown Coalition is, so
Yeah,
the
so-
city will have one, yeah. So Newberg Downtown Coalition, are they affiliated, Sherry, or are they?
They're
Or they-
affiliated Main Street currently. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, so they're currently at the affiliated Main Street level. They're going through some changes again with their board and staffing, so we'll might be a surprise to Sherry, we'll find out. So we'll see what kind of happens in the next few months and maybe see how we can work with them.
Thanks very much. You guys were very informative.
Yes.
Great.
Thank-
Good questions.
Thank you so much, you guys, appreciate it.
Take care. Nice to see you. Rachel.
Okay, take care.
Guys,
Bye.
take care, bye. I got to work with those lovely ladies for a while. It was really fun.
That was really a good presentation.
Yeah, then.
They know their stuff. Sherry is brilliant and has worked. She's been a Main Street director at the local level, at the state level, and national level. She knows what she's talking
Sounds
about.
like, yeah, sounds
Just brilliant.
like Joy's not afraid to jump in and get some things done too.
Yeah, Joy gave this awesome presentation on historic windows one time at the Oregon Heritage Conference. Just fascinating to listen to, and I'm just like, I know nothing about construction, and I care so much about what you're saying right now, so
Yeah.
she's.
So are they connected to the Oregon? I don't even remember the name of it now, but there's the Oregon Heritage Museum or something. They're connected to that, right?
So they are, Oregon State Parks and Recreation Department.
Okay.
They are in the State Historic Preservation Office, which is like an arm of the Parks and Recreation.
Okay, so it's like all
Yeah.
connected somehow.
Yeah, it's all in there. The Oregon Heritage Museum is not quite it, but they have the Oregon Heritage Commission, which they make our statewide, like designations for historic landmarks. They do, a lot of things like that, so. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really, windows, they were like a thing for me too, cause I just love the way old windows look, even with the wavy glass, you know.
Oh, right, there's just.
But I know they're not the most efficient things in the world, but
And if you guys are curious about them, go check out the Oregon Main Street website. There's a lot of great resources you can learn from there. Make sure you click on the portal and try it out, because there's a lot of cool resources that are available to the public on all sorts of information. That
Yeah, I
was-
didn't realize.
That was my job to manage.
Oregon Main Street looks.
Yeah, Oregon Main Street, their website, yeah, if you look up Oregon Main Street, it'll get you to it. But yeah, that's a great website to see, and if you look at the portal, the members portal, it's, you know, it's up. It's all there.
I didn't realize that the Second Street Church, I didn't realize that it changed that much, that like, it was flat and now it looks better, I think.
Yeah, so they returned it to the historic facade. right?
Yes.
All right, well, the next thing we're gonna look at briefly is the 5-year plan, and let me get all of my windows organized where they need to be, so that we can share screens again, just here. You know what? There's too many windows going on here. See? So we're gonna look at our 5-year work plan draft next. Now, basically what I did was I just took our conversation from last time, pulled out the main points at this point. The next step will be, I think, commission members getting together and actually talking how it looks like, or what it will look like to actually work on those points. And what our goals would be for the next 5 years. And then those will go to council for council approval when we're ready to move forward. So let me show you what I have pulled out, some of the suggestions based on the conversation. Let's find that one.
It's interesting how she said that they don't limit the amount of grants, but yet they do.
Yeah, they do and they don't, you know?
I mean, I get it. I mean, it's especially if they're doing it statewide.
Yeah.
You know, spread the wealth around.
You know what, art. Find me for a moment, it's telling technology is just not our friend tonight. Sorry about this, you guys. Usually these meetings are very smooth. But something is happening tonight.
Like I said, it's 1.5 years.
Yeah, it's doing some interesting stuff there. All right, well, sure. Okay. Nope, that's not what I meant to share. All right, it is fighting this one too, so. Well, I'll just talk through it since the PowerPoint does not want to work right now and there's, that's really interesting. So the biggest thing on there is the idea that, we were focusing on the primary goals of preserving historic structures and human stories. Those were the two big topics that came out of our whole discussion, is that the human story and the historic structures were the things we cared about the most. There wasn't as much interest in natural environment and that caring for that environment, but there definitely was in preserving kind of the human and built environment. So for historic structures, we identified goals of updating the historic inventory, developing an awards program, collaboration with local organizations for building restoration, so like the Main Street organization, and exploring a historic downtown designation. In addition, we wanted to create pass-through grants so that we could find a way to pass grants through to building owners, things like that. And like we just heard, there's some opportunities for doing that using different organizations in our area. All of these items I would posit to you all, we can do in the kind of a 5-year structure. So what we might start with is something like updating our historic inventory. And then over the next few years, using what we learned from that to start building on applying for grants for different restoration projects. So it would be a multi-phase project. I think you may remember that in our last meeting, Curry Gill shared with us that some cities will have kind of a 6-year plan where they kind of roll through every 2 years. They know they're going to try and apply and get the CLG grant money. And then the other years you can be applying for the Diamond in the Rough grants and things from Oregon Main Street. So you can kind of use all those different grants together to work towards one building or one project, or a couple of buildings projects as identified through your historic inventory. Under human histories, we really talked about the desire for a communication and education plan. Establishing a museum was a big goal that we had, and then doing oral histories. So my suggestions were that we start working on doing some research into cities that do have museums and how those look, how they manage them. Is it managed by a city? Is it managed by a nonprofit? Who owns it? Who runs it? So doing that research, looking into funding and things like that. And then coming up with some ideas of how the city of Newberg could have a museum, or how it could work with one of its existing historic buildings or museums. We already do have the Hooverman Thorne House Museum. While working on that, you can think about a communication and education plan. Is this something we want to do working with a historical society, or do we want to do it, independently? Is this an organization, and how is that going to be managed? Is it going to be the members of this commission actually doing research and writing and putting things out, which could be an option? That was something that was expressed at one of our last meetings. You definitely want to work on that. And then conducting oral history interviews. How do we work with our community to gather those stories and make sure that we're preserving them? I would also argue that we can kind of come up with a multi-year phase plan for this. So the first year might be doing some really base level communication, education, outreach with the community, and starting to examine and research those museum ideas, and then building up over the years as we build our collaborations with other organizations, deciding how we might want to pursue a museum or a repository of some sort, and establishing a program for oral histories. So those were the main goals that were identified by the group. However, there were some secondary goals that came up multiple times. One was historic homes, that we care not just about downtown and commercial buildings, but we also want to preserve some of our beautiful historic homes in the town. Another was our Chinese history and other untold histories in the area, making sure that we are thinking about the stories that aren't known, the histories that aren't known, and
Yeah,
researching.
that fascinated me when I heard that. I never would have thought that,
So we
I thought
have
that was pretty cool.
Chinese history in the area, right? Yeah, so, and then the other is the landmark designation process. So are we going to help more of our homes or buildings in general become designated as on the National Register, the State Register of Historic Places? So a lot of those things do tie directly into our other goals. Doing the Chinese history, other untold history directly ties into an education program of some sort. Historic homes ties directly into all of our work with inventorying our historic homes. So Brian, since you're new, I'll give you some more information. The historic inventory, basically we hire an archaeologist who goes through the city and they research and identify specific homes and buildings throughout the city that have historic value for some reason. So historic value can be because of, you know, how they're built, their architectural style, when they were built, an event or person they're associated with, something that occurred in that location. So there's a few different ways that things can be designated. Historic doesn't necessarily just mean old though, so we have to be really careful about that. There's a very strict, reason why they'll call something historic on the state level and the national level. So that's one thing we can look at there. And the same with the landmark designation process, that's a natural outflowing of those inventories. So even our secondary goals align pretty well, and I think could be integrated into a 5 or 6 year plan. We may consider, right now we have it as a 5-year work plan. We could expand that to a 6-year if we think that more closely aligns with the grant structure that we have available to us. Or vice versa. So we're not making any decisions tonight, but I will propose in the future that this commission considers forming some work groups to start planning out what it looks like over the next couple of years, because I've heard from all of you that you want to do more work, so we'll make that happen.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, and because we talked about having these meetings more often. So, I don't remember.
Yeah, we had one extra meeting and then we, to start working on this work plan last time. And we have, at that meeting, we didn't resolve to have more extra meetings yet. But that's definitely an option that we can consider. We are going to be sending an email after this meeting to try and reschedule, because we do have some items that really have to be decided by this board or commission. So we do need to reschedule probably very soon, because we have a couple big items that need to go before this commission. We'll bring those up in just a moment. So we've got a lot of work to do ahead of us, but
Sounds like,
yeah, good work though. Good
it
work.
sounds like fun, but yeah.
Yeah.
sounds-
It'll be, yeah. And it'll happen if you guys are ready to go. All right, so the next thing that was on our agenda was the historic review for a request for an exterior alteration of Newberg City Hall. This is a hearing item, and we cannot actually proceed with it because we don't have a quorum. But Clay, do you want to just give them an overview of what it was and what it is?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So, this is a request that came from our Public Works Maintenance folks. And so when the ice storm hit and resulted in the flooding at City Hall, there's a lot of work that's going on, and they wanted to be able to leverage some of that work to do some exterior modifications. And also they felt that some of the flooding had contributed to damage to the windows, which were already struggling with opening and closing. They had some real concerns about performance, about ongoing maintenance, and about safety. And safety in the side of security, people getting in, as well as safety, large windows that are fairly low and don't have any barriers, and staff who aren't used to that, possibly falling out of them. So those sort of things, which sounds silly, but it's just the sort of thing you don't usually have in a typical work environment. So some concerns they had. Rachel, should I bother having this on?
I think it might help, that might pick it up because it makes it louder in the whole room.
Okay.
So.
That's fine. I just didn't want to create more. But, so what went out in this agenda packet for this evening and what will go out in the next one will be the application materials that were submitted by the Public Works Department, and then I basically on behalf of the Planning Department, help them put that narrative together and all the other information they were really trying to submit for the Historic Preservation Commission to make a quasi-judicial decision. So, that's basically asking you to give them an approval, denial, or something in between, and that's would often be something like an approval with conditions if you're modifying that approval in some way. When you look at it, at the packet, the way that the staff report's written, it kind of gives you a summary of what's being requested, then goes into the resolution or the order that you're being asked to adopt. In this case, it's an order. And then it has findings. So that goes through the criteria that are our municipal code associated with historic landmarks and are directly related to the responsibilities of this commission in their decision-making responsibility, that quasi-judicial role. So this commission is somewhat unique compared to some other ones. A number of other ones are strictly advisory. So the only thing they might ever do is adopt a resolution, make some statements, give some recommendations. But this one in the historic landmark review kind of role, they're approving or denying things. And so that's what it would be, and it was basically, changing out a number of windows that were installed in the nineties, are not period specific, but there is a stylistic change that they're asking for. That stylistic change is consistent with some of the other windows that are already there, particularly some of the oversized windows that are on the east side of the building and the north side of the building. But it's something that you all can consider on, did they do good enough on what they asked for? They think they did for what the building needs to do and preserving the general character that we're trying to preserve with the look and feel of the building and allowing it to continue to operate. So that's how it was evaluated. So that would be something that's good to look at too. This commission, as I understand it, hasn't been asked to do that many quasi judicial reviews. And you'll have me here to help answer questions, and then you'll have at least one representative from Public Works here that'll be at the next meeting too, even though we don't know what date that's gonna be on yet. So Preston was
Is
here
that what that
earlier.
guy was?
Yeah, so-
Or that guy?
Yeah, so that guy was Preston, and Preston is our superintendent of maintenance for Public Works. So all of the facilities, includes roads, includes buildings, includes all sorts of stuff, fall under his purview. And then there's a couple other people that have helped us with this too. One of the things that we use is we marked up some of the plans from our as-built for the building, and then annotated those to show which windows are being modified. And what kind of ways. And one of the things we're trying to do is making sure that the glazing remains the same, essentially the layout associated with those windows, so you can be able to typically see a difference if you're across the street or something. Yeah. And that's it for that one. Although if either of you looks at the packet materials already and have specific questions, you can answer them. And when we do these too, usually staff gives a presentation first to go over that. If there's another applicant that's not the city, because we're kind of doing this a joint application, then the applicant would present on their behalf if they choose to or want to after that, and then we get into public comments. In this case, we didn't receive any public comments. We circulated for agency referral process, which is pretty normal, and we had several come back and saying that they reviewed it and there was no comment, which we wouldn't really expect. This is not really changing the what we're doing, where we're doing it, or how much we're doing stuff. We're still going to be our local government. But absolutely.
Right. Next item on the agenda is, we received a request for a special meeting for upcoming moving review of a designated historic landmark. And that was the group, the folks that were here earlier. They decided not to stay since we didn't have a quorum, so we will not actually have public comment from them on this item. But we need to schedule a special meeting to review an upcoming application for a moving review of a historic landmark. So there's a building on the George Fox campus that is a designated historic landmark. George Fox needs the space for parking lots. And so they would like to get approval to move the building rather than apply to demolish it. They have worked with these folks who have a property on 2nd Street, and they want to get permission to move it. So
To their property.
to their property, yeah, on 2nd Street. So there, that is, what we're looking at there. They don't have all their paperwork in at this point, so, we can't really decide yet, but hopefully they would have something if we have a special meeting.
Yeah, so how it typically works for these sorts of things is we do a completeness review first, but once it's deemed complete, the city only has 45 days to get it to this commission to get it. So the clock is ticking, and depending on what my case planner says, he's looking at it now, it was received a week or two ago. And so he'll really be deeming it complete or incomplete anytime. And I don't know when that is, but we don't get to hold up the completeness review getting done just because we haven't calendared a date.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful with that. This group, they're really, so this commission should do what it's gonna do, but they would love it if we would schedule something by like the middle of June. So they're very animated. From a staffing perspective, this isn't a very hard staff report for us to write because they're already doing the preferred alternative, which is someone has a designated landmark and in lieu of demolishing it, which they're not asking for, they're requesting to move it. So as long as we can get it across town safely, that's fine. And that's some of working with engineering and giving us the moving schedule. So
What do they want to do? Do you know?
they want to move it on 2nd Street, and I don't recall if he said it would be for commercial use or residential use.
It's zoned for
Presume.
both there.
Yeah, so it's considered a C3, the downtown commercial or central district. So they could be doing really either of those things. There's a number of other buildings that are similar in kind of general size to that. And so it'll fit in relatively well. Some of them are residences and some of them are businesses. So it'll actually, regardless of what they choose to do, it should work out relatively well,
Yeah.
in my opinion. So we don't really have a problem with it. We don't have a historic landmark getting demolished. We just have it going to a
Yeah,
different place,
that's,
which is close to our downtown core, which is a good thing.
And that's kind of the best of both worlds all
Yeah,
in there.
yeah.
Yeah, so, and they have done several other buildings in town, I guess, or at least one other building in town, the old Bill Cutts Realty building on Second Street. They just did the remodel there. It looks beautiful, in my opinion.
I have a quick question.
So, yeah. Yes,
So the scheduling the mid-June, that was scheduling another meeting for us, correct?
that would be scheduling an
Okay,
extra
that's-
meeting.
That's what I was,
So since we only have a couple of us here, we won't be able to decide on that. I'll be sending out an email probably tomorrow morning, and we're going to try and get that scheduled as fast as we can. We'll see how that works. I'm not available before June 10th, so we'll see. That's the
And
challenge.
so it's not your obligation to be
Yep.
available on their schedule. It's just what they're interested
Sure.
And we can try, because,
Well, yeah, I think that's,
Right.
what they're doing is a good thing, so I certainly would like to be available.
in. And that's exactly why I wanted to share it there. What they're hoping and dreaming for, we're gonna do our best.
Yeah.
To get as close to it as we can.
Rather than demolishing it.
And so, right.
Exactly. So that's the last item on our agenda today. The only, if there's anything that the commission would like to bring forward, you're welcome to share things. And then, we can draw it to a close. I did have just a news item I heard of this week that I wanted to share with this group, and I haven't, it's not on the agenda, but one of the buildings on First Street, that had right now computer in it, and, I think Radical Ruby Salon, a few other places on the corner.
the old,
It's a
Bank.
bank building, yeah. Almost every corner building in town was a bank at one point. But that one has been purchased, and they are planning a full remodel of the building. They say they're looking for historic preservation. And said something about a whiskey bar on the bottom floor, and Airbnbs that were 1890s themed on the upper floor. So that should be interesting. So just so you know, there, you know, that likely, I don't know if that'll come our direction or not, but it was a thing of note that I thought you guys would be interested in. So
And that individual has already started
Okay.
with the planning firm.
I
So
figured
he's
you
made a
know.
couple of calls just to make sure they could do what they wanted to do. So we've been able to, so they've been very forthcoming, and so we're starting off on the right foot, asking questions.
Perfect.
The one thing I would add too is there could be another quasi judicial item in the offing. We had a pre-application meeting with a homeowner south of Second Street, I think it's on Third Street, maybe Fourth. But they want to do a garage addition to an existing historic landmark. And so when you add something that is a new piece, there are certain criteria that you're supposed to meet with doing that. So that could be a historic landmark review too. Based on what they've described so far, that could be a historic landmark if they decide to proceed. So that would be coming to your commission. So you guys are getting to flex those quasi judicial muscles.
Yes. Well, that's gonna be our big decisions. All right, any items from the commission?
I don't,
All right, well, thank you both for being here tonight while we dealt with strange issues that we generally do not deal with. So thank you for your grace, and we will see you guys at our next meeting, which is to be scheduled. There is one scheduled in 3 months, so. September? Yeah, I think we have a September meeting scheduled already, but there will have something in the meantime to address the quasi judicial item in front of us that we need to address.
Yeah, that'd be neat.
All right.
Cool.
Have fun.
Thank
All
you.
right, take
guys.
care.
thank you.